Story 1. You do not realize how expensive it is to be homeless, especially these days. Eating more than one meal a day quickly adds up to an outrageous amount over the course of a month, especially if you are trying to survive on something halfway nutritious. Story 2. Kicked out when I was 16. Homeless until I moved into a friend's caravan in his father's backyard a year later. Then homeless again off and on until I started working on a farm in my early 20s and could afford rent. The most shocking thing that people won't tell you is when you are homeless and young, you do not realize how bad it is until you look back on it. At the time, I just thought that was how life was. Story 3. Nothing feels worse than being on someone's couch when they do not want you there. However, you have nowhere else to go, so you just cry. I found that out being homeless as a teenager, and that part was the hardest. Feeling like I belonged nowhere and that simple luxuries had to be earned by myself, not given. Also, sometimes the poorest people can help each other the most. Story 4. How long it stays with you. It has been decades, and the fear that it could happen again is definitely there. Story 5. I was homeless for about a month at 19. Not very long, but still too long. Within 2 days, I was almost sexually assaulted. Everyone I know who has been homeless for any length of time has experienced nearly being sexually assaulted or has been assaulted. Story 6. The way people treat you like you are invisible. How many predators there are out there that you will not see until you are in a vulnerable spot. The amount of human suffering in the world. Being so cold when sleeping that your body wakes you up so you do not freeze to death. It has been years since then, and I know I will never look at the world the same way again. All it takes is bad luck and a few bad decisions, sometimes not even that. Story 7. How hard it is to become housed again. Many landlords and apartment complexes do not want to hear about it because they think you might be a problematic renter. The system is slanted against people, period. Story 8. How easily hidden it can be. I'm pretty sure no one at work or school knew I was homeless. I slept in my car in the community college parking lot, took a shower in the locker room, went to class, ate my meals in the cafeteria, went to work, then came back to sleep in my car again. Took me months working minimum wage to afford the deposit on an apartment. I didn't take out any loans for my first 2 years of school. I don't think people realize how many others are living in their cars, shelters, or short-term housing, flying under the radar. They assume that all homeless people are dirty, mentally ill, drug addicts. Those are only a tiny fraction of the unhoused community. Story 9. The health impacts. I ate one meal a day most days for over a year, and it was dollar menu fast food more often than anything substantial. I am still assessing how some of the health issues I have today are influenced by that time period. Story 10. I work in public education, and the definition of homeless is broader than living on the street. Homelessness can include living in a hotel or sleeping on a friend's couch. It was not until I became a teacher that I discovered I was technically homeless my senior year. My teachers knew it, but they did not do anything. Story 11. If you behave, there is no help for you. My mom and I lost our home when I was 18. We tried to find a shelter. They asked if we were pregnant. No. Addicted to drugs. No. Then they did not have any way to help. That was not how I thought it worked. I have a great deal of empathy for those groups, and everyone deserves shelter, but as an overachieving teen facing sleeping outside, it seemed wildly unfair. Story 12. Homeless at 13 on and off until 22. It is exhausting to be in a constant state of survival. It is dangerous because while sleeping, you are vulnerable. Even deep in the forest, people can walk up on you while you are asleep. Many people are okay with homelessness as long as they do not have to see it. There are also many who take pleasure in messing with vulnerable individuals. Story 13. How people completely blame you for being homeless, and how much time I spent trying not to be seen to avoid police and for privacy. How much it sucks not to have a bathroom. How much impact weather makes on your day. How being unclean for so long really feels. I was working and homeless, living out of my car. Completely changed my worldview for the worse. Story 14. It is really hard to start from scratch when you do not have any savings, references, or a permanent address. You need an advocate to get a foot in the door anywhere. You also use up all the goodwill you have built with friends through couch surfing or storing belongings in their basement to avoid losing everything you own. This is something you can only do once or twice before it jeopardizes friendships. Story 15. I have been homeless 3 times at ages 10, 13, and 23. What has always shocked me is the number of people who are homeless despite having a full-time job. Story 16. It is surprisingly expensive to live somewhat comfortably in a car from my experience, but once you have the things you need and a routine, it is not horrible. If you do not have a car, finding a routine is the best advice I can give. Sounds absurd, but it is true. Many places hire now even if you tell them that you do not have a home address, which is great. A routine is what helped me and my fiancée when we were living in a car. Story 17. How difficult filling time is, especially as there are not many places to spend time without spending money. The whole day with nothing to do and nowhere to be, and somehow I had to find a way to keep myself occupied until it was time to sleep again. It was absolutely maddening, especially considering I found it difficult to concentrate or walk for long periods because I was medically starving to death as well. Story 18. I was very temporarily couch hopping when I turned 18. The desperation was something else. I remember the night I went to this guy's place. We had mutual friends and had been chatting for at least a year, but never met in person. We got drunk listening to music and ended up kissing, but I stopped there because I had just been through a breakup. He said if we did not have sex, he was going to kick me out. I had 2 garbage bags and a backpack full of my belongings. I could not leave. That was too heavy to carry and get anywhere. And where would I go? There was nowhere. Welcome to womanhood, I guess. The worst part was, afterwards he started talking all sweet to me, acting cutesy and wholesome. It was so confusing. I did not actually realize it was rape until years later. Story 19. How expensive it is. If you are not just eating uncooked food bank food, then it costs a fortune to get meals when you cannot store any kind of bulk purchasing. I was in a motorhome, and it still cost a fortune because even when the refrigerator did work, it would constantly get too warm and rot all the food. Story 20. When you have to steal food to avoid dying and privileged people think that you are a horrible person. I was homeless in my early 20s. It was really awful. Thankfully, I never ended up on the street, but I was very close to it. I was trying to finish my degree when the pandemic hit, my school closed, and I had nowhere to live. I bounced around several dangerous situations while working and attending school, and it was terrible. If you have the option to move in with family, please understand how grateful you should be. May the hell of being unhoused never find you. Now, about 5 years later, I have worked hard, suffered, and struggled, but my finances are mostly stable. I have a job with a salary and benefits. I have been clawing my way up, and now I work in an office full of very privileged people. I don't fit in at all, nor do I want to. These are not my kind of people. Someone mentioned a homeless person who was caught stealing, and a few people were quick to judge him harshly, assuming drug use, saying he belongs in jail, calling him a loser, and so on. I stayed silent because not long ago that was me. Now I am sitting here with people who went on skiing trips as kids, own multiple properties, while I have many roommates and take public transit because the area is very expensive. I worked hard and suffered, and now I am here. It is not ideal, but I am closer to where I want to be in life. People do not understand that it takes decades of persistent and consistent effort to avoid sinking even lower and to claw your way up through life when there are no handouts or support to be found. It is very difficult to make something of yourself when meeting basic needs is your goal. It takes decades. So please be quiet if this sounds familiar. Just be quiet instead of judging poverty and nonviolent crime. Story 21. How easy it is to become homeless with no one in your life noticing that anything is happening. It is such a vulnerable position to be in, and it can be hard to tell people what is going on. But no one even notices that anything is going wrong. Story 22. How easy it is to end up there, even while working a full-time job. You are almost always one injury, short paycheck, emergency car repair, layoff, or similar event away from homelessness. The spiral happens faster than you can keep up with, and it is nearly impossible to pull yourself back once it starts. It is a domino effect. There is no pulling yourself up by your bootstraps to avoid it. It does not matter what kind of money you make or how many jobs you work. Landlords will evict. Mortgages will foreclose. Lenders will repossess. Credit card companies will sue. What little money you had to get yourself caught up will vanish faster than you can make it back. You can take out a loan to catch back up, but it is just more debt to add to the pile and only prolongs the inevitable if you are already there. This may seem like a grim way of looking at things, but this opinion is not just based on my experience. Story 23. At 16, the Children's Aid Society gave me a choice. Either stay in a foster home until I aged out at 18 or be homeless, as they would actively prevent me from being eligible to stay in homeless shelters or student welfare, which still existed at the time in Ontario. I chose homelessness. It was the only time in all the years I spent in care that I was ever given a choice. I don't regret it, but what I think would shock people most about being homeless is how boring it really is. You have no money, no future, nowhere to go, and no one who cares about you. Every day is the same: food, shelter, avoid predators, then do it again. Kill as much time as you can at the library before they ask you to leave. Hang out in the mall. Collect bus schedules until the people behind the counter whisper that they think you are schizophrenic for coming every day. Now what? How do you kill time? Where do you go? What do you do to fill another empty day? Story 24. I was homeless for about a year after I got divorced. My family basically booted me out. My ex-husband and I were on good terms, so he took custody of our child while I tried to figure my situation out. I barely had any possessions, but I was robbed constantly. My only home was my car, and I donated plasma a few times a week to keep enough gas in the car to get back and forth to my jobs. I sold marijuana and was basically a rideshare driver before it existed. No prostitution, but I worked so many odd jobs during that period, I cannot remember them all. It took me about a year to get myself situated, even with 2 jobs and a car. Trying to keep the car running well enough to get me to my jobs took the majority of my money from most paychecks. I had several people telling me to sell my car and use that money to get a place, but I wouldn't have been able to keep a place without transportation. I live in the South, buses are all we have, and they don't go everywhere, even in a larger city. I was also lucky that I was homeless at a time when gasoline was very cheap, so keeping my old car fueled wasn't too hard on me. I used to roam the city at night and park and sleep during the daytime. It felt safer. I still wake up now, more than 25 years later, dreaming that I forgot to lock the car doors, and it causes me to wake up instantly. Story 25. Once you get wet in the winter, you are doomed. It is impossible to dry off, and you just get colder and colder. Sometimes people will let you into a public space if you are not too far gone. If it is at night, though, there is a good chance you will not make it to morning. Story 26. Shelters will turn you down even if there are open beds if you do not look like you can get a job and housing within 90 days or less. Story 27. I have not been homeless. I am a social worker who has worked with homeless individuals for 25 years. I am also male. I will say this: the stories I have heard from women are 10 times worse than those from men. I do not mean to minimize how difficult it is for men. However, the stories I have heard from women and the things I have witnessed are absolutely horrendous. Homeless teenage females have the hardest time. God help them if they are attractive. The danger is not only from homeless men. Some time ago, I had to report a police officer who was pressuring an 18-year-old homeless high school student he had just met to come live with him. As a male, I have developed a distrust of other men. Story 28. How terrifying time passing is. Like, there is a deadline for everything. A deadline for finding shelter for the night, a deadline for eating, a deadline for nearly every little thing that is taken for granted when you have a roof over your head. I always felt I was racing against the clock just to survive. Story 29. Everyone is trying to sleep with you, forced or not. You are not safe as a vulnerable woman from anyone, anywhere. Story 30. There was once a time when I did not have money for food, and I lived off peanut butter sandwiches. The first ice cream bar I could afford was the tastiest thing I have ever eaten. I had my parents to fall back on, but they physically beat me so badly that I had to leave the house. I was afraid of being harmed. I learned never to rely on a man or a father. A man is not a plan. Father is not a plan. Story 31. I was pretty much homeless on and off from age 12 until I got married at 18. It unfortunately opened my eyes to how common evil people are. I have strong intuition and never ignore a gut feeling now. I have recently started choosing to live in my car at times because it doesn't faze me. I work a great job and have money, but if I lose everything tomorrow, I will be just fine. I think people who have never lived this life place too much importance on things that are trivial to me. Story 32. Two things. How much it actually costs to be homeless or living in your car, especially as a full-time student who had to find a way to get to campus every day for class and then find a place to sleep every night. Where I am, the only safe place I could find was a rest stop about 20 miles away. How 90% of homeless individuals support each other. If someone needed cigarettes and I had some, I would share. If I had no food and there was a person cooking, they would invite me to have some of what little they had. It was one of the most supportive communities I have ever experienced. Story 33. Shelters have very strict arrival and departure times. At my local shelter, beds were first come, first served from 7 o'clock to 7:30 p.m., and you had to leave at a specific time. No sleeping in was allowed. If I took the morning shift, I had to wait 4 hours before the shelter opened. My local library was only open 4 days a week. Many coffee shops closed at 5 p.m. I did not have a car, and the mall was nowhere near the shelter. It was difficult in winter. If I took the midday shift, I would get off work too late to get a bed. I would just put my hands in my pockets and pretend I was out for a walk. I would walk until the sun came up. I never missed a day of work. I never drank alcohol, smoked, or used drugs. And I never told anyone what was happening. It was cold, lonely, and exhausting. Story 34. I was 18 and moved to another country for a woman in her 40s after being kicked out of my adoptive home for possessing tarot cards. I ended the relationship after 8 years, and she stalked me for about 6. Homelessness is desperation to me. I was seeking family I never had and trying my hardest to obtain something that would never be. I made a lot of bad decisions that led to something good. Believe it has given me a better appreciation for other people struggling. I have 2 children now. It did not work out with their mother, but they are the most cherished thing in my world. I wake up to their smiling faces every day, and they are all the family I will ever want or need in life. I would sacrifice everything for them. I am truly happy and have a wonderful woman in my life whom I hope to someday call my wife. Story 35. Having well-off parents means nothing. My dad and stepmom kicked me out at 18 so I could make it on my own. Their combined net worth was $4 million the last time I was told. Story 36. When you are homeless, absolute control and daily physical abuse can be a tempting alternative because at least you have a bed, access to food, and relative safety. Story 37. Never trust someone who says they will always be there for you. Everyone has their limits. I grew up being told by my mother that I always had a place to stay. I was kicked out at 23 after coming back from the military. I was in college, not a drug addict, and have always been a quiet person who cleaned up after myself. I am not perfect. I left the occasional item lying around for a day or two at most. I did not think the person who gave birth to me would use that against me. She did not like that I told her I think my little brother and sister should share some of my chores, so I ended up in a shelter. Story 38. People think the government or someone will help them when they are out of luck. Can happen to literally anyone. No one has to take care of you, and drugs are not always the reason you are there. Being a teenager on the street means you likely have no driver's license or photo identification, no rental history to get a place, and no address to get a job. As a teenager, it is almost impossible. In the city, it was also difficult managing how many predators there actually are. There are men talking to young girls, offering extravagant job offers with a home in another town, or taxis at night offering women a place to stay, or the number of sex offenders who cannot get a job and continue preying on homeless girls. These were common traps. Story 39. I worked at a large hardware store, and there were employees living paycheck to paycheck, including myself. Story 40. I lived on Venice Beach during the height of the pandemic. It seemed fun for a moment until it turned really dark, incredibly fast. Bad methamphetamine was coming from the corner of Rose and 3rd Street. We said that was where the devil lived. People would take this methamphetamine and attack each other for no reason. I was a victim of this and was beaten with brass knuckles. A girl I knew had her tent set on fire with her inside it. I saw another person get run down with a car on the boardwalk. There were multiple stabbings, shootings, kidnappings, and sexual assaults. But perhaps the worst was a girl I knew who got attacked by a street method called gurring, where someone is drugged against their will repeatedly with experimental psychedelics until they permanently lose their mind. She was an innocent girl, and within a week, she was digging in dumpsters, speaking gibberish with a crazed look on her face, drooling, completely separated from reality, an actual living hell. I had to carry a machete on my belt constantly for protection. Police officers did not want to go near the boardwalk at night. It was just that dangerous. The shoreline Crips would patrol and collect taxes at night or else. I eventually raised enough money busking for a skateboard for transportation. Big mistake. When people saw me cruising with a new Dogtown board, they gaslit me by saying I stole it from the Crips. Word of that spread, and I had to flee Venice at night with people actively trying to kill me. I have never been so terrified. I ended up all the way in Huntington Beach the next morning, asking for help, not realizing I still had my machete on me and looked insane after having lived in the elements for over 6 months. This resulted in a police helicopter circling me, with officers releasing K-9 units. I was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon on a law enforcement officer and placed in solitary confinement for over 60 days because of COVID-19. For years later, after so much hard work, I finally had the charges dropped. I have 2 jobs and a dog, living in an incredible apartment in mid-city Los Angeles with access to everything and opportunities to play DJ gigs and meet some of my most influential musicians. I have been in all kinds of therapy to process this, but I am forever changed. The night terrors, panic attacks, distrust in people, and flashbacks. It's all so much. I thank God every day that I'm alive and survived that horrific experience. Homelessness with that degree of violence changes you in such a way that it is hard to relate to others and hard to talk about because it's just too much for the average person to comprehend. You don't know just how bad it can get until you experience it, and I wouldn't wish that experience upon my worst enemy. I am forever traumatized, but it does get better as long as you persevere and have true grit, one day at a time. God bless anyone who has experienced this. Story 41. I was homeless for about a month when I was 17. The hardest thing for me was finding somewhere to sleep. I have blacked out most of that month, but nights when it was raining were the worst. Finding shelter, especially since I was not in an area with homeless shelters, was difficult. Story 42. How high stakes every decision is, and clearly there is no adult or parent to help guide you. I was homeless in the 1990s before the internet, so you could not just search online for how to do things that you were not taught, and I was not taught much or to find resources. So you just had to hope for the best that your uninformed best guess did not backfire and make things worse. Story 43. I was homeless for only a couple of weeks in college after being sued and evicted from my place, but I was lucky enough to have a car to sleep in. I didn't learn anything shocking per se, but I did learn that some pizza restaurants throw out entire still warm pizzas. Also, selling blood plasma is a great way to get instant cash for food. I told a classmate what was going on, and she told her parents. They let me stay in their basement for a month until I saved up enough to rent a room. Story 44. I slept in my car for almost a year to help my mother pay her bills. She is now battling stage 4 cancer, and I am helping her again. Lately, I have been having nightmares about losing my housing again. I guess I did not realize the trauma from being homeless would follow me. I was homeless in my 20s and just turned 40. Story 45. The fear of being assaulted or killed for being homeless and transgender is terrifying. Another challenge is heat waves and living in a car. My partner and I lived in their car for several months last year, and at the end of June and beginning of July, there was a severe heat wave. The car did not have any air conditioning, and we were homeless with our cat. He almost did not survive that heat wave. Story 46. I was homeless when I was 16. I always grew up hearing that homeless people should just get a job. I learned real quick it is not so easy to just get a job when you have no home address, probably do not have your social security card or birth certificate, and no money to get either. If you do get the money to attempt to get those things, you need a home address that matches your identification to have it sent to, especially if you do not live in your birth state like I did not. Story 47. The summer after college, I was homeless with my boyfriend. We stayed in our car on friends' couches, including a very religious relative who lectured us for not being married, and squatted in an unfurnished abandoned house. At times, we had jobs. We were very young and took it in stride. I didn't realize the term homeless applied to us because we weren't sleeping outside as I would typically picture it. What surprised me the most is that sometimes you would have no idea someone is homeless. Story 48. I was not homeless exactly as I was still leasing a place, but I was in another state during an extended trip. During that trip, I lived out of my car for several months as though I were homeless. There is very little tolerance for someone just sleeping in a car, so I had to move several times a night. There are not many places to park and just be. People always assume the worst. I was not homeless and was very productive earning money. Story 49. The people I knew who were homeless said sexual assault and rape are extremely common. Many homeless men choose to be homeless because they can rape homeless women regularly without consequences. Others who do not live on the street also do this and drive in circles looking for homeless women to assault. That is why women on the streets try hard to be invisible. One friend said she would stay near grocery stores because she thought it was safer. However, men eventually figured out she was homeless and returned late at night, circling the area to find where she was sleeping so they could assault her. She had to hide frequently at night because multiple people who had seen her at the grocery store came looking for her after it was closed. Story 50. I was homeless for 6 months from 2023 to 2024. I lived in a youth shelter. The number one thing that stuck with me was how many kids came straight out of foster care to living on the streets. Some other things I recall include a deep desire for personal space. There were rarely any times when I was completely alone and able to just exist. Story 51. The fact that a young person will rob an old person of food. The fact that elderly women and men will take advantage of the young sexually. How nice people really are. Waking up and learning the original gangster passed away in the cold. People burning others in their tents over a $200 debt for drugs. The cool people you meet. Those you wish you did not meet. I can go on and on. Ask me anything, really. Story 52. I was homeless on purpose for about a month after my lease ended and before a scholarship started in another state, so I was just a tourist. Lack of engagement from others and feeling like a pariah. Few places where you could simply exist. The library was a refuge. It was constantly dangerous. Constantly packing and unpacking belongings was exhausting. Maintaining hygiene was difficult. Being on edge constantly and the effect that level of stress has on the body and mind. The kindness of strangers. The cruelty of strangers. Story 53. Not having storage space can make life expensive or risky. You start to smell quickly, especially if you are younger or spend a lot of time outside. Passing as normal so that staff and security do not notice you becomes very important, especially when you need to use the restroom or find a place out of sight to sleep. I was lucky enough to just be a campus bum at college. Once I got a job, I managed to reach out to someone subletting at the very end of my public transit line. Story 54. I grew up in foster care and became homeless afterward. I slept on buses and in university bathrooms. I did not attend classes but was able to blend in. The worst part of my homelessness was having nobody and being out in the rain without shelter. I remember being so hungry I wanted an orange from a tree, but it was too high up. I was so young and knew nothing about life. The most shocking thing to me was that it was nearly impossible to become stable without some kind of help. Eventually, I received help with a low-income apartment after calling around, and it was for foster youth. Story 55. I was homeless for only 3 months many years ago, but it completely changed me. I learned that no one wanted me around. I could count only on myself, and I was not good at taking care of myself then. Car is not a great place to sleep. My car registration expired while I was homeless, so I could not renew it. You need an address and money to renew registration, so I kept getting tickets. It was a ridiculous catch-22. Story 56. The fear and confusion. You do not know where to go or what to do. I could not figure out how I got into the situation or how my life had taken such a turn. Luckily, it was only for a short time, and I have turned my life around. Story 57. Everything that you have established in your lifetime starts to deteriorate. Friends do not want to worry about your problems or keep you around. Family relationships are ruined because of resentment. Savings get drained faster than expected as a teenager. The body enters starvation mode after eating the bare minimum for about a month or two, causing intense pain throughout the day. Depression and apathy fill your mind. Drugs and alcohol become the only relief. You start to realize that nobody in the world truly cares about you. Nobody is willing to help if you are essentially in a death spiral. People only help others if they can benefit themselves or if it is a minor inconvenience. Any average person will become like those seen on the street, living in complete misery given an unlucky chain of events. Life circumstances can also change dramatically for the better given a lucky chain of events, even after being homeless as a teenager. But resentment towards family often remains. Story 58. How easy it is to fall into the hands of a predator when you are desperate for a couch to sleep on. I was kicked out at 19 and ended up marrying the 30-year-old who let me crash on his couch. I knew him for 3 months at the time of getting married. It did not go well. Story 59. There are far more hidden homeless people than most realize. The man with reasonably clean clothes sitting on a laptop in a Starbucks for 8 hours a day, refilling a single cup of coffee, could be working or just sitting in air conditioning. It is possible to be homeless and still have belongings like a phone and a computer. Not all homeless people are drug addicts or mentally unwell. Many who are down on their luck live rough but have the ability and determination to save for a laundromat visit, go to a community center for showers, avoid sleeping under bridges, and carry a backpack of belongings that help their situation. However, this is often not enough to stabilize their lives or escape poverty in a difficult economy. I spent almost my entire late 20s living this way in Washington, D.C. I stayed at Pret-a-Manger all day, filling out applications on a slow, half-broken computer, refilling black coffee, sleeping in a cemetery where nobody went, hidden from others, and begging for laundromat money to maintain the illusion that any day I would get an interview and the nightmare would be over. Story 60. Just how little there is to catch us when we fall. There are shelters, but not enough to house us quickly and efficiently to make it easier to get and keep employment. There is also a lack of help for our pets, who are often forgotten in the struggle to remain housed. Additionally, the many unnecessary unwritten rules to get a job are ridiculous. I should only need to provide my name and social security number to apply. That's it. If you want more, interview me, talk to me, get to know me as a person. Story 61. It is so boring. I was keenly aware of all 24 hours in a day and still have not shaken that off. Imagine being bored out of your mind, but there is no television. There is no thought of, I might as well get those dishes done. And you certainly cannot just pace around and check the refrigerator. I very nearly lost my mind. Story 62. I was not exactly homeless, but having an unstable housing situation, moving from place to place, really affected my sense of safety and security. Even though I have been living at my current apartment for over 2 years with no issues, there are moments when I start feeling paranoid about losing my housing and become very anxious. It is traumatizing. Story 63. Socks. You never know how quickly you wear through your socks and how damaged your feet can become over an extended period of time. Story 64. It was really hard to find somewhere to sleep. I was fortunate to be comfortably homeless because I had a car, but the police kept telling me I was not allowed to sleep in it, no matter where I parked. They always told me to go somewhere else, but I never figured out where that somewhere else was. Story 65. There are not enough homeless shelter beds. There can be issues of serious violence, assaults, and rapes in homeless shelters. Many homeless shelters kick you out early in the morning during the day, even if you are sick, recovering from surgery, or it is freezing and you have nowhere to go. Local stores and other places may not be open yet because it is before business hours. Being homeless is traumatic. I think anyone eventually would be emotionally impacted by such stress. Contrary to the popular narrative of people simply refusing psychiatric medications, if you are forced outside during snow or summer heat, that can destroy your pills. Most medications must be kept at room temperature. Also, if you are a woman worried about getting raped in your sleep or any gender worried about having to run from police because sleeping outside is illegal, being sedated from psychiatric medications is extraordinarily dangerous. It is also incredibly hard to stop your belongings from being stolen or thrown out by others. While many people do not trust homeless people with spare change, often it is easier to get free meals than to have the money needed for prescription copays and bus fare to the doctor's office. For people who use substances, dry, sober shelters can mean that someone who relapses loses a support network and must be around even more temptation in a wet shelter, where using does not result in being kicked out. However, wet shelters can make it difficult for people to get clean because they can never get away from substances. Homeless shelters in some areas are not open in the summer. There can be arbitrary rules, such as having to arrive by 3 p.m., which makes it impossible to work a 9-to-5 job, attend evening therapy appointments, attend 12-step meetings, or see your children. You might not be allowed to stay with your partner or spouse. Sometimes you are only guaranteed one night of shelter at a time, making every day a lottery. When you are inside, you are allowed only a very small locker, not a tent or many belongings. If you do not get a bed the next day, you do not have enough outdoor gear to survive sleeping in the snow. I am surprised I did not lose toes from frostbite despite having decent boots. The flesh literally turned black, and I thought it was dead. The dehumanization of people ignoring you and treating you as inherently dangerous, untrustworthy, or looking to take advantage is shocking to feel from random strangers, friends, and sometimes even healthcare providers or professionals. If you are homeless, it makes you look bad to new landlords. It is very hard to work while homeless, and gaps in your resume make it harder to get a job. There are many roads to homelessness. For young adults, a parent may be incarcerated, absent, deported, dead, or seriously or life-threateningly ill. Family may reject them due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. The young adult may be escaping abuse from family or a partner. A mental health emergency may lead to eviction from college dorms. Student visa status may prohibit working here. An unexpected injury or illness requiring hospital admission, sometimes even for a few days, can cause missed income, work problems, or termination, which can lead to homelessness. Fires, hurricanes, or tornadoes can destroy homes. Other family members or roommates may suddenly stop contributing financially. Disability can interfere with the ability to work, but disability benefits are difficult and slow to get and often inadequate for housing. There are also shortages of domestic violence shelter beds. People often do not have money for first or last month's rent and security deposits or cannot afford moving boxes. Those who should help sometimes do not care. When I made an appointment at my college counseling center to ask for help with resources for impending homelessness, the social worker coldly shrugged and said, "Google it." Story 66. When you experience your first winter outside with nowhere to go, you are obviously cold, and you do anything to keep warm. But something else happens inside your chest. It is almost like the coldness never goes away. I was homeless one winter when I was about 25. I am 36 now. My chest is still ice cold. Story 67. I was homeless for more than a couple of days due to a drug-induced psychosis when I was young. The worst feeling for me was the eerie sense that everyone around me had a normal life while I was trying to survive in their midst, completely invisible. I looked distraught and definitely needed help at the time, but everyone walked right past me. Story 68. Hi everyone. I am really impressed by your valuable comments. Most people who do not understand what it means to be homeless, especially young people, should read Reddit. Could you please share where you are from, such as city, state, or country? I am in France. I want to say bravo, because you seem to have overcome this situation and are able to express yourself well in English on Reddit from your own home. Sorry for my French-English idioms. Story 69. The expense and the fact that there are too many homeless people, with resources only helping so much and shelters always being full. Story 70. How easy it is to slip through the cracks. There were many opportunities to improve my situation at the time, but someone older or younger, or people with established family units, typically received priority. Late teens to mid-20s means aging out of youth programs, with few ways to make up that gap. There are many adult consequences with little option to prevent or prepare for the incoming damage of those. Story 71. The awkwardness and embarrassment of having to ask around for somewhere to sleep and trying to find money when you are underage is difficult because you cannot just get a job. Not all of your friends want you to stay with them, especially because their parents said no, and you have to take whatever food you can get. Story 72. Food stamps can be very frustrating sometimes. I could not buy hot food from the grocery store, which was too fancy, but I did not have a way to cook food, so it was all cold. I was allowed to buy canned food, but not a can opener. Instead of buying the $5 large chicken deal and eating a lot, I would end up buying a $14 sushi roll since it was a cold item. Then I would receive comments about how irresponsible buying sushi was, but I was tired of cold Lunchables. Story 73. I was so hungry all the time. My mother had kicked me out of the house, and it was weeks before I ended up in a group home. The things you will do for a bit of food, those things will stay with me forever. Story 74. Okay. I'm dropping this here for whoever needs the information. You can send your mail to your local post office's physical address as a residence address and pick it up. It is best if you have a post office box to avoid losing mail accidentally. Enter the post office physical address, then add unit, box number. Anything that requires a residence address will be sent there. I learned this as a camp host. It worked beautifully. Story 75. Being homeless at any change of life must be harrowing. If you have your health, you can get over it eventually. You have youth on your side. Embrace life's challenges. Stay safe. Story 76. I was softcore homeless. I wasn't disowned or destitute, but I lived out of my car because of adverse circumstances. I assumed I would rebound quickly while I figured my life out. There is an intoxicating freedom to homelessness. I almost spiraled downward, became an alcoholic, and totaled my car. I had a good family to fall back on, but without that, I would have definitely become a burnout. The crazy thing is, I still think about going back to that life. The freedom was unparalleled, and now I feel stunted by not wanting to mentally commit to any lifestyle for more than a season at a time. That's something many people don't understand. Homelessness is freeing until it isn't, and you have nowhere else to go. That's why it's so hard to get people off the streets. Once you've lived every day for yourself and yourself alone, it becomes really hard to step back into the systems of society. Story 77. You are just one desperate bad decision away from total self-destruction. I was homeless for 3 months during my senior year of high school. I slept in a grocery store parking lot, survived on 7-Eleven chili that the attendants let me have for free, and used the school showers. I was working and going to school. There were 4 strip clubs within a 1-mile radius of where I slept in my car in the middle. I am confident I could have danced underage, but I didn't. I also knew that extended stay hotels were expensive compared to rent. Instead of sleeping in a nice bed temporarily, I spent 3 months saving for first and last month's rent, so I could rent an apartment for low-income families and have a permanent bed to sleep in. I was able to get my apartment 3 days after I turned 18. There were easy ways out the whole time, but none were sustainable and each was a distraction from my goals. Story 78. Honestly, how boring it is. I was couch surfing and I couldn't stay at the place during the day. I had to leave, hang around until I started work, come back, sleep for a few hours before I was up and out again. Spending 8 hours of a day with limited sleep and money is arduous. No wonder I drank so much during that period. Story 79. I'm a mother of 2 teenage boys. I have read through the other comments. I have never been homeless, but I have taken in 3 boys and 1 girl over the years. I have also taken in 3 adults in need of housing. They all come from various backgrounds but needed a safe, loving, clean space to live. They stay at my place until they are ready to leave. I wish I could have taken in all of you so you did not have to experience what you went through. My heart breaks for you, and I wish I could somehow take it away. All of my strays, as I lovingly call them, are doing well in their lives. We are all still close. I wish you all had someone like that in your lives. I truly do. I am in the mindset that if you need anything and I have it, it is yours. I wish more people thought that way. We all need to help each other, but many do not. I hope you are all in okay places in your lives now. I wish I could give all of your younger selves a big mom hug. I am so proud that you all survived your experiences. So proud. Story 80. Hostels were horrible. Everyone my age in their late teens was a drug addict and often a sex worker. Those older had alcohol issues. The oldest seemed like they should be in care homes. No one spoke to me as they perceived me to be posh. Having said that, at least there were hostels back then in the early 1990s. Story 81. The number of places where you cannot park overnight is limited. I lived in my Jeep for a few months. I worked and saved every penny I could until I had enough for the first and last month's rent and security deposit for a studio apartment. Story 82. How invisible you become. People walk past you as if you do not exist, and that feeling of being erased is harder to carry than hunger. Story 83. Not sure if it is that shocking, but people will see you as vulnerable and try to take advantage of you as much as possible. No, they are not offering a ride to be nice. They expect something in return. You have to sleep with all your belongings attached to you, or you will wake up and they will be gone. Sleep with your backpack on, your foot wrapped around your other bags, and so on. If you sleep in a park or somewhere that is not concrete, you will get eaten up by bugs. When it is cold, you shiver so much. I think being on drugs saved my life a few times when it dipped below freezing. I was so cold I could not even think or move. I just shivered until I drifted off to sleep. There are some types of cold that no amount of clothes or blankets will help. Just going into a store like Starbucks to charge your phone becomes dehumanizing. They will tell you to leave even if you buy the cheapest drink. They will not let you use the bathroom either. If you are in a store, they will watch you like a hawk. You never feel normal, you somehow feel invisible but also seen and looked down on at the same time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.